Jake Wallis Simons as well. He's the author of a brand new book, Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and itself. A very good afternoon to you.
Hello.
Lovely to have you in the studio for a change, but also what a day to have you in to talk about your brand new book. We've got it on the screen. On a day when so much of the news is dominated by this peace plan. Before we talk about it, let's just play a couple of quick clips from that press conference in the White House yesterday, where certainly Donald Trump, as usual, was, downplaying his efforts. Let's have a watch and listen of what he had to say.
This is a big, big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization. And most importantly, we discussed how to end the war in Gaza, but it's just a part of the bigger picture, which is peace in the Middle East. And let's call it eternal peace in the Middle East.
Indeed, let's call it eternal peace in the Middle East. We shall see how that turns out. Here's what Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, had to say, rather more, I should say, fact-based.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims. It will bring back to Israel all our hostages, dismantle Hamas's military capabilities, end its political rule, and ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
Well, that was what the two men behind this peace plan had to say. We're waiting now on Hamas to decide whether or not they're going to sign up to it and what that means. Jake Wallis Simons, we've spoken to you so much in the last couple of years, and we are, next Tuesday is the anniversary, the second anniversary of the October the 7th massacre in 2023, and you've got this brand new book out, Never Again. What do you make of the peace plan? Talk through some of the detail of that, and what do you think the chances are that it could deliver this so-called eternal peace?
Well, this is obviously one of the most intractable conflicts in the world, so whether this will work or not, who knows? It could be the best day in Western civilization, as Donald Trump said. It could not be. But either way, it's got a hell of a bigger chance to work than the Macron, Starmer, pathetic appeasement plan. And the two main differences, I think, are, number one, what comes out from the Trump plan is he actually wants Israel to win, by which he means he wants...
What a crazy idea,
he wants the forces of democracy to prevail against the forces of jihad. Sounds crazy, but that's what he wants. He wants the hostages to be released first. And he said that if Hamas doesn't release all the hostages within 72 hours, then the gloves are off, the plan's off, and they're done for. And Netanyahu's got the green light to wipe them out. Whereas the Macron-Starmer peace plan said, we'd like the hostages back at some point, please. No plan, no conditions, that was it.
Yeah.
And the other really big difference between them was that the Macron-Starmer peace plan just gave the Palestinians everything, gave them recognition of the state.
They called it a reward themselves.
Without making any demands of them to do anything.
Yeah.
So it does seem like the European plan just wants the Palestinians to win.
And the interesting thing is, of course, Middle Eastern leaders have backed this plan. No doubt that was all done behind the scenes, long before that press conference announcement. Qatar have had a bit of a reality check with that Israel attack on the Hamas leaders in Qatar, and a sort of, hey, just like Iran, you guys are on the list too. What did you make of that phone call that Netanyahu appears to have been for? I'm not sure it would have been his choice to make. Phone call he made to the Emir of Qatar to apologise for taking out terrorists who've orchestrated the attack of the October 7th attack on his own people, and then to apologise for targeting them in Qatari territory. I thought that was quite extraordinary that he made that phone call, so he must have felt it was worth it.
Yeah, it's being billed as an apology. I'm not sure it actually was an apology. I think it was more that he sought to explain to them that he wasn't seeking to target Qatar. He was just going after terrorists. And the thing was that if it would have been a Mossad operation with an assassination on the ground with a bomb planted, it wouldn't have seemed like a nation state attacking another nation state. But the fact that it was a missile shot from a plane outside of Qatari territory that went in, it does seem like that. So I think he wanted to clarify that and lay the groundwork for working together. And that's the other real sort of plus point for this plan versus the European plan, that it actually involves people on the ground. It involves the Israelis, it's got the backing of the Arab states, and it may even get Hamas on board. If not, then they'll be wiped out.
What do you think the chances are? Because that's it, they've got the option, you have to basically give up having any role in leadership of the country. You have to lay down your weapons. You can leave the country if someone will take you. I don't know who wants them. Or you can stay, lay down your weapons, but you have to give the hostages back. They'll get that exchange of prisoners as well. Hamas get to basically walk what's left of them. Hamas get to walk away scot-free at that point, don't they? Is this a win for Hamas, or the fact that they wouldn't be engaged in the government, not officially anyway, is that a big loss for them?
I think that this is not Hamas as it was on October the 7th. No. You know, Hamas has had layer after layer of leadership assassinated or killed. These are, a lot of them are kids.
Well, I thought Israel was just targeting children. Did you not get that memo?
Sorry. I must reprogram my head with the BBC. BBC lines.
Jeremy Bowen, if you're here, do come and help. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Hamas leadership has been decimated. The top layer, the second layer, the third layer, all the way down. So what we've got now really are a lot of the time it's kids who've picked up a Kalashnikov, not little kids, but teenagers sometimes, fighting the Israelis. Don't have any experience of leadership, of military strategy or manoeuvres or anything like that. And so I think that they've got two cards left. What they want is to ideally keep the hostages, that's a big card, and if not, keep their own survival, not because they care about their lives, but because when they live, they'll be able to further the cause of destroying Israel. Here's
the thing, what I find very interesting, before we get to the more detail of your book and what it's about and why you felt the need to write it, is that, you know, pro-Palestinian people have been, you know, the campaigners and supporters, they're happy to wave their flag, wear their keffiyeh, whether politically, you know, political leadership or indeed people are on the street, remarkably quiet on social media in the last 20 hours or so. You'd have thought that these are people who absolutely profess that, you know, their biggest concern in the world is innocent Palestinian civilians, particularly children, who are claiming there is a genocide and mass starvation and that Israel is completely, you know, the cause of all of this, and that Hamas are basically just imposed on the Palestinian civilians and it's not their choice. You'd think they would be absolutely clutching at this peace plan with both hands, saying a chance for these people to be fed, to be saved, to not have Hamas ruling them. But they seem remarkably quiet. Is that possibly because that their motive is not support for the innocent Palestinian people they claim to support, but something else?
Well, Julia, I mean, look, the truth is, unfortunately, that all the people, or many of the people, the majority of the people, I would say, who take to the streets week after week in support of the Palestinians don't really care about the Palestinians. They only
almost
care,
like Hamas.
They only care about what the Palestinians can do for them, can do for their own ego, their own image, their own politics. If they really cared about the Palestinians, for a start, they'd be celebrating this peace plan, but also they would be protesting against Hamas, or they would have been since the beginning of the war. There are more protests against Hamas in Gaza than there are on the streets of London. That tells you a lot about the people on the streets week after week.
OK, well, look, let's talk more in detail about your book, Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. Now, I mean, the first time I talked to you about a book you wrote was about Islamophobia. Sorry, Israelophobia. Sorry.
That's something else.
Yes, exactly. Well, quite, I don't know where that came from. Israelophobia, you know, and you know, the oldest hatred. And absolutely fascinating, you describing, you know, the hatred of Israel. I know it's not the same as anti-Semitism, but my goodness me, that Venn diagram is very, very round, is it not? Tell us what this book is about. Why do you say it's never again, question mark, crucially? Why never again, question mark?
Well, I think since October the 7th, we've had to draw the question mark behind never again, after never again. It's no longer assured that it's never going to happen again because we can no longer depend upon our allies in the West to back up that vow which they made in 1945. And what I'm looking at in that book is how the rise in anti-Semitism, obviously it's bad for the Jews, but what it tells us is something that's almost worse about the West. You know, since October the 7th until now, every now and again, someone like me will get a call from someone in Israel saying, "How are you?" And I'll say, "No, how are you?" And I'll say, "No, how are you?" Because we'll be all right. But the West, the future of the West is less assured because the Jews know who they are. We've been around for thousands of years. We've survived, you know, attempt after attempt to wipe us out and have flourished in spite of that. The West, however, the rise in anti-Semitism here says some very bad things about how we've lost ourselves. We've lost our sense of identity, our sense of confidence, our sense of who the enemy is, our sense of who our friends are, and our ability to stand up and demand that people either play by our rules or get lost. We've lost all that. The Jews haven't, and for that reason I think the Jews will survive, but as for the West, that's more of a worry.
That's very interesting. And again, that was my big take from a recent trip to Israel. And again, also the phone call, how are you? The person I was speaking to yesterday for a podcast, spent the most of the night in a bomb shelter with a 1-year-old child, because of warnings of bombs. I mean, it is an extraordinary thing that they should be worried more about us and worried about anti-Semitism here in the UK as well. And I can understand that, because that sense of community and the existential battle that Israel is in, I do liken it to what happened in the Second World War, with Britain standing firm against the Nazis. And people talk about people doing the right thing. People didn't have a choice. Yeah. And people in Israel don't have a choice right now. You have no choice. If you want to survive, this is what you need to do. Why do you think, because you and I have spoken about this before, why do you think the West has lost its way so much? Not just that going down the route of anti-Semitism again. And by the way, it's the nice people. We've always had the extreme right, the skinhead, that side of things. But that was kind of dissipating. That was going. I mean, we definitely imported a lot of anti-Semitism. If you import a lot of people, Arabs from the Middle East, I'm afraid you import their cultural values. And one of their strong cultural values, largely across the Middle East, is anti-Semitism. But we've also got a whole load of sort of the left wing, the Jeremy Corbyns, others. But there's a whole, but it stretches, I think, way into even this cabinet right now, of these left, the nice people, the so-called progressives, who, they got a problem with Jews.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, this is a big question, and it's one that I explore a lot in my book. But I think what it comes down to is the aftermath of the Second World War, that first vow of never again. And the elites came up with the idea, the concept, the culture, that in order to avoid fascism, you have to get rid of our sense of selfhood. So we have to get rid of our sense of national pride, our sense of respect for our borders, of our history, and patriotism. And you need to have governments to govern our governments, because our governments couldn't be trusted to govern themselves.
And the people couldn't be trusted to elect the right governments.
Exactly. And what developed was a kind of what Eric Kaufman, the political scientist, called an asymmetrical multiculturalism, a sort of what Roger Scruton called down with us, but up with everybody else. Yeah. It's sort of basically fineism. Everyone's basically fine apart from ourselves.
And that's like the when in Rome thing, isn't it? Well, when in Rome, you must take on the culture of the country you're in, apart from when people come to Britain, when we should absolutely adapt to their culture.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're the Romans, we're adapting to you, and you've just come here.
But that's the weird thing about that, is this idea, of course, that we don't have a culture. And part of that, isn't it, just that we don't have a, our church is a kind of, if you could turn up on Christmas Eve or on your wedding day, that's good, thanks very much, call yourself a C of E. We're kind of a sort of a, we take a lot of our cultural norms and traditions with a pinch of salt, don't we? In terms of, we're not evangelical largely, you're not forceful on this. Our state religion, COV, not most people here, most people in Britain are agnostic or atheists now. People kind of shrug, I'm a Christian because my parents got me Christian, but that we don't celebrate the strengths of that culture. When I say as an atheist, I massively celebrate the strengths of that Judeo-Christian culture, which delivered to us things like, individual rights and women's rights and human rights and our freedoms and the Industrial Revolution. I mean, that is all completely caught up in that Judeo-Christian culture. But we've decided in the West, so many of our leaders anyway, that none of that not only doesn't matter, but actually it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're describing really is the old way that we used to be, when we had the confidence of empire, the confidence of victory in the Second World War behind us. And so we didn't need to assert ourselves with our flag. We didn't need to be particularly chauvinistic or jingoistic about it. We just knew who we were. But that kind of modesty, and it's also a modesty that comes from the British character as well, but that was in a way exploited by elites who were trying to tell us to undo our selfhood, to tamp it down further, with devastating results often. I mean, one little example that always sticks in my mind is the one of Salman Abedi, the guy who bombed the Manchester Arena a few years ago, killing 22 people. Now, he was spotted by a security guard called Carl Lawler, which I talk about in my book, who spotted him, was suspicious of this Muslim-looking man carrying a heavy backpack, but didn't stop him because he feared that he was being Islamophobic. Yeah. That's what they've done to us. They've caused us to doubt our instincts, to believe that we're racist before we believe anything else about ourselves, with horrible, blood-soaked results. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, the rise of not just anti-Semitism, but the obsession with people's race, religion, and things like that as above all else, as opposed to character, actions and deeds, which is what certainly the 1960s progressive view was about, has certainly taken over, I mean, in every area of British, I would say, Western life. But it's particularly imbued in our leadership, and not just on the left. It's, you know, it's in the Tory party as well. It's certainly in the Lib Dems, Greens, it's all over the world. But where do you think the anti-Semitism that we are seeing here and now, and I would say, I mean, even in recognition of a Palestinian state, there is no scenario where an attack was made on any other culture, any other people, any other country that would result in that reward from Western progressive leaders, as they think of themselves, like Keir Starmer, like Mark Carney, like Emmanuel Macron. But Jews/Israel singled out. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of reasons, but one of them is that, I mean, you talk about those leaders all feeling like the same people with different coloured rosettes, and I described it in my book as centrist fundamentalism. Yeah. That they're centrist and they're fundamentalist because they're demanding that anybody who doesn't agree with them is a fascist or a racist and must be sidelined and silenced. And that's what we're seeing a backlash to today. And I think that in a way Israel represents a democracy that hasn't lost its sense of self and hasn't lost its ability to fight for its people and to understand who its enemies are. I mean, you talked about being in the bomb shelter with a one-year-old, that experience. Israelis know they can do that. Yeah. We don't know we can do that anymore, I don't think. And so I think that in a way, Israeli culture, Jewish culture, we're Democrats, we gave the world its system of morality, certainly the Western world its system of morality. We know who we are, and we're also democratic, and that's a rebuke to the elites who've been trying to tamp down that sense of self in their own societies, thinking that it's an evil thing. And I think that, fast forward to today, you know, Israel has become the mirror image. It's everything that we have lost. Yeah. But as a result, Israel's flourishing. It's one of the happiest countries in the world because it hasn't lost those things.
And interesting, of course, in the West, the celebration of victimhood and Jews and the Israeli state refusing to be victims anymore. I mean, that's never again has to mean something if you've lost every member of your extended family.
Exactly. It's this victimhood. I mean, I wrote a piece for The Spectator this week, linked to my book, about October the 7th. Yeah. And I found myself writing, you know, it's October the 7th, the second anniversary. We don't need your tears. The ones who are going to cry for us have done so already, and the ones who haven't never will. What you need is our defiance. We're not going to start sitting around asking you to feel sorry for us. We're going to fight and defend ourselves and assure our survival. And now that doesn't correspond with the West's view of virtue, of what should be right. And as a result, the West is going down and Israel is the democracy of the future.
And this is the thing, because the reality is, and in every society where anti-Semitism has taken a hold on itself, it doesn't, that famous poem, you know, first they came for the Jews, you know, I was not Jewish. I mean, you know, good God, James O'Brien, I think, cites it every single Monday morning, does he not? But the reality is that, you know, a society where anti-Semitism takes hold, and I think that anti-Israel, I don't think those things are the same, but they are remarkably in common with each other these days. That is the beginning, it's the downfall of civilization, and the West is in an existential battle that so many people don't even recognise. With, you know, mass uncontrolled immigration, with communist forces, you know, with the evil, you know, the dictators of, you know, Russia, of China, but also with Islamofascism, and the nice people, as they like to think of themselves, who've been in charge for so many years, whether with a blue rosette or a red rosette in America, Britain, wherever, it's almost like they haven't woken up to the need to assert Western values, assert democracy, assert liberalism in the true sense of it, and they've kind of forgotten that we're going to have to do that, and we're going to have to do it sooner or later, or we won't exist anymore.
Well, I mean, the poignant thing for you know, myself as a British person and all of us is seeing our leaders criticising Israel when they should be learning from Israel. Mm-hmm. If you look at the metrics, in Israel, it's a young country with a high birth rate. Beyond
3 children on average,
which is the only one in the OECD, which is
that's including secular Jews as well. This isn't just, you know, very religious families.
Exactly. So it's a young country, growing country. Its economy is booming even during wartime. There was a baby boom even during wartime, first time in history so far as I'm aware. It's culturally coherent, the people know who they are, defend each other, love each other. There's a great sense of family in Israel. And it's one of the happiest countries in the world. It's now, after 2 years of war, it's number 8 on the scale, behind the Scandinavian countries. We're 24, I think. You know, Italy's 40. Right, so that's what Israel's got going for it. It hasn't got mass immigration problems. It hasn't got all these problems that we have. look at ourselves and our own position. We don't know who we are. We're miserable. We've got a high number of deaths of despair, mental health, lack of patriotism. Our economy is going down the tubes. Our culture's going down the tubes, and we're an ageing country with a bad demographic story to tell. We are looking at a dark next few decades. Israel's looking at a bright next few decades. That's before we even look at the military side. Israel's the most dominant position it's been in since 1967. Our defence is pathetic. You know, so Israel.
The idea that we could have taken on the Iranians, the Hezbollah, Hamas,
or Hamas,
and the forces in Qatar.
So we need to be learning from Israel. I think the people in Britain who are resisting this centrist fundamentalism know it deep down. We've had enough. We're a bankrupt country. We're morally bankrupt. We're economically practically bankrupt. We need to be reinventing ourselves and learning from those virtues that we have lost, which Israel has not let go of.
But I mean, I think the vast amount of British people haven't lost those values.
No.
I think it's
We've
there.
had them beaten out of us.
I think, you know, the lion can roar again. I really do believe that. And
Absolutely.
it's just, we are led by, you know, pygmies. We really
and the message of my book is up with us. Instead of down with us, let's start saying up with us. That will solve everything, including anti-Semitism. Up with us, that's what we need to say.
That's really interesting. Listening to all of this, it's Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Your thoughts on what he has to say?
I think what you've both been talking about how the Israel question really speaks to how you feel about the West, and how you feel about civilization, frankly. If you have a jihadist incursion into Israel on the scale and of the barbarism of October the 7th, and you even hesitate as to which side that you're on, I think that speaks to a much broader social sickness. And historically, you've seen it, and Jake has written about it so well. Anti-Semitism is a sign that society is going awry in all kinds of different ways, falling for some very deep maladies, problems, conspiracies and what have you. But I think there's a particular question today, because of the fact that the most deadly, lethal form that anti-Semitism is taking globally is in the form of Islamic jihadism and so on. The fact that we're particularly complacent about that, when we have had the Manchester Arena, when we have had the London Bridge attack a few years ago, when you have had 7/7, and not to compare any of those things to this almost apocalyptic scale of what happened almost 2 years ago in Israel, the fact that there is not a recognition of that common enemy.
Well, I think we should light a candle and not look back in anger, Tom. I think that's the solution, isn't it?
It's just the price you pay for living in a big city. Is kind of how these
but
things
the thing is,
bollards everywhere.
To add to that Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is active in Britain, dominates a lot of Muslim communities, has got a political operation, legal operation. They're coming for us too, the same people, and we don't recognise it.
Yeah, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? What has already gone wrong? Exactly. And again, people like me, again, but just say, you know, if we need to be dealing with this. Like the idea that we should have tens of thousands of people who in our streets who are actively needing to be watched, but because of the terrorist threat. I mean, maybe that's not the solution.
That's
but
right.
there we are. Jake, it's always good to talk to you. I know you're a foreign policy journalist as well for many, many years. You know what you're talking about. Jake Wallis Simons, Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself.